With us. We would really like, we've had in the past asked MPPs and other politicians to live on minimum wage or on social assistance a budget for a month. So we'd love if you play the game and come on and see how far you make it as a minimum wage worker. We're trying to get to food, but your leader Tim Hudak keeps on dragging people to jail when they can't afford it. So we really like you to play. We really like you to play. Well, currently, minimum wage workers are making 19% below the low-income cutoff. So what we'd like to see is at least to have them dragged out of poverty so they're able to afford their food costs and then peg those increases in the future to the cost of living increases. So $14 an hour is about where you don't have to live in poverty to work. So we think that needs to happen today, if not yesterday.
I think that there is a lot of merit. I know it's difficult for people who are living on a minimum wage right now, and I guess the only thing that I would say is that we have to make sure that we balance that, because we've got to make sure that employers are going to be able to pay it, because you've probably heard some of the stories where it's increasing and so people have to get laid off. So I'm in favor of fair wages for everybody, but we have to make sure that employers can pay it. So all I'm saying is we need to work to find a balance. I know that there's a government committee that's going to be taking a look at that. And certainly I want to participate in that to the extent I can and to bring your concerns forward as your representative.
So I'd like to just challenge that though. So we've had studies after study after study that shows that increasing minimum wage doesn't kill jobs. So if you have a study you can cite to us to let us know where you're getting this information from when workers are losing their jobs when the minimum wage is increased. We'd love to see it. We can email you our 23 references that ACORN and the Workers Action Center in Toronto have referenced. We've never seen jobs die. In fact, 54% of our gross domestic product in Ontario and across Canada is driven by consumer spending. So in actual fact, when minimum wage workers aren't living below the poverty line, are able to spend that discretionary money in the economy, we'll see small businesses actually be able to hire more employees because they'll have more money coming into their coffers through increased demand for their products. So we've actually seen that, especially during the recession in Ontario, when we saw increases during about 2010, or right before 2010, that there were actually jobs were added in the economy during that time, in particular industries such as the service industry where workers earn minimum wage.
The other fact is, Jesse, 54% of companies that pay minimum wage are large corporations with 500 or more employees who can actually afford to pay more instead of their profits going up 30-40% a year, yet none of that's being shared with the workers.
And we can see, because your husband has actually bemoaned the fact that corporate Canada has been sitting on $500 billion in cash reserves without investing in to create jobs. And some of these companies are companies like Boston Pizza or Pizza or Walmart Canada or Target Canada who are making massive profits but still paying their employees the legal limits to as low as they can possibly go. So what we know is that these companies would actually pay their workers less if they were allowed to, while they're making billions of dollars in profits and not really investing it back into creating jobs, like we've heard from the rhetoric on the right about cutting taxes for the rich, and hopefully that trickle down will take effect. But as we've seen, even your own husband and our former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, there we go, who have said, publicly that they are, and these aren't the most left-wing folks out there, right? The Bank of Canada is not a left-wing organization, but they've bemoaned the lack of investment even with the huge profits we've seen in Canada. So we think it's about time that in Ontario at least, we get this up to $14 an hour, and then we're able to create those jobs that the private sector seems unwilling to do.
And the other thing, Jesse, is pegging it to the consumer price index or the cost of inflation every year will take the politics out of it. I mean, we don't need politics, and we don't need politicians deciding at an election time to have a ballot box question of, do you think the lowest paid workers are worth a few more pennies? I mean, we look at Alberta, who is by far not a socialist province. They peg their minimum wage to the cost of living, as does Nova Scotia, as does the Yukon, and Saskatchewan's about to. So let's take the politics out of it. Let's set a rate set it to the cost of living and be done with it so that we don't have to do this every year or every 3 years during election periods.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that because I agree with you that when you do it once every 5 years or 10 years, whatever, then you have to play catch up. Then it becomes much more difficult for any party to do, and it does become very political. I think that there should be some kind of a fair mechanism for being able to make sure that people are able to keep up. So I'd be happy to take a look at the studies. I do believe that we need to develop a mechanism. I look forward to working with the committee. And the only two other points I'd like to make. One is, look at what the president is doing and failing to create higher paying, better jobs in the province of Ontario on a whole bunch of fronts. I think they fail miserably at that. Secondly, what I feel very strongly about is we need to get everybody into the workforce. I've done a lot of work with people with special needs, a lot of people who are really struggling that are, I know it's not a minimum wage issue, but it's an ODSP issue. People that aren't able to get out of poverty, we need to give everybody an opportunity to work and to work for a fair wage. So I don't think we're that far apart. There's some points that we won't agree with, but I think there's many more points we can agree on. And so I thank you for being here today, and I certainly look forward to
And thanks for coming out to speak with us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you all very much.
Remember, Christine, minimum wage workers have children.
Yes.
Quite often, more and more every year. And if they have more children, you got 2 children, you're on minimum wage, you're left
very
with your
hard.
hand out.
I know, and it's hard to keep up with things.
And you got to remember the last minimum wage
Yeah.
increase, the prices didn't stay the same. They kept going up.
Yep.
Price of gas has gone up, everything's gone up,
And
but
if you're a
not the
student,
minimum wage.
our tuition's increasing 5% a year, and our minimum wage, where we predominantly work, is not increasing along with that cost of living. The cost of living for students is much higher than in the general population. So those are all things I think we need to take into consideration. But yeah, thank you so much, Christine, for coming out. In fact, speaking of having a daughter and working at minimum wage, there's my daughter right now, who's an activist in herself in her own right.
Well, it's good to see the little one does great.
Proud of the people.
If I may just add two more points. What money the kids do have. In Ontario, there's a $9,000 income tax threshold. In Alberta, it's $14,000. In Alberta, they've got what money that they do spend or can spend. Here, it's 13%. Provincial sales tax. In Alberta, it's 5%. Now, if there's one thing that you folks with the PC party and the NDP can agree upon, this equation is unsustainable. You're giving more back. Yeah, they get less in Alberta, but they're keeping almost twice as much, between $9,000 and $14,000. So you can do a couple of other things as well as increase the minimum wage. You can heighten that threshold of the deductible, because the millionaires are not making $14,000 a year, okay? It's people with disabilities like myself, my kids, that are then forced to go plant trees. My son this summer had to work 2 jobs where he was put into illegal circumstances and he was told to put up and shut up. This is what's being done to our youth. My child has now had to quit that job because he was forced into an illegal situation that the DRPS has been involved in. My point is here is that he's been off work for 6 weeks, and he's going to have to make the decision between cat food and tuition. And I'm only getting $400 a month, as you well know, from WSIB, and that's a sin in all of itself. The system, the equation is unsustainable. So, minimum wage up, threshold of the income tax up. Let's make it equivalent with other Canadian provinces. And then when we talk about the GST and the HST, let's have a higher rebate for those folks. They need it. They need more cat food. And less stress of having to worry about whether they're going to go to school today or whether they got to make a choice between U of T or Fanshawe.
Well,
This
Joe,
is
I
not
think
right.
you're making a really good point that it's not just a simple matter of just raising the minimum wage. There's a lot of other issues that come into it, and so I really hope that that provincial committee is going to take a look at it in a meaningful way and not just take a look at that one narrow issue, because there are many more things that need to be
This
considered.
equation, the PCs and the NDP agree upon. You folks can get together and solve this if you want to. That government is wrong. It's crooked. You know that. Mr. McGuinty and Miss Wynne is just leading a bunch of hapless bunch of bozos. You know that?
Here, here.
You know that. Okay? But kids are starving. Kids are being forced into not having jobs. And as that study said, we've got the highest unemployment youth rate in, where is it, all of Canada or Ontario? That's Christine, your husband's the Minister of Finance for Canada. This is the last place that should be happening.
Well, I can't
Push
say for
the
him, but
muscle,
I can tell you
kick
that
him in the ass.
he-
Start do what you need to do to convince him that your kids are kids. They all go to school together, and they love each other. And they
are looking at bringing jobs programs and training programs.
let's do it for
Drive
real.
down
'Cause you
wages.
can have that conversation.
I will.
You're great because Tim's going bye-bye. You're next up to bat.
And make sure you stop
Next up to bat.
and say no right to work.
Tim's got a job waiting for him as a jail guard, so he's going to be okay. Thank you so much, Christine. All right, whose turn is it on Minimum Wage Monopoly? We're back for our intermission.
Oh.